6 weeks after my sister-in-law gave my brother's secret away, my father knocked on my door holding a casserole dish, like it was a peace offering instead of a leash. I almost didn't answer. I had clocked 60 hours that week. Installing HVAC systems in a building that didn't have working elevators. And the only plan I had for that night was a shower hot enough to peel paint, and a pizza I didn't have to share with anyone. Then I heard him out there, shifting his weight on the welcome mat I never bought. The one that came with the apartment, and I knew if I didn't open the door, he'd just stand there until the neighbors started talking. "Dad," I said. "What's in the dish, lasagna?" He said, "Your mother made it." My mother's been dead for 3 years. He winced. "Your stepmother, right?" I looked at the dish, then at him. He had on his church jacket, even though it was a Tuesday, which meant he'd come straight from somewhere that mattered to him, somewhere he'd rehearsed something. My father, Walter Briggs, was a man who only dressed up when he was about to ask for something he already knew was unreasonable. The jacket was armor. The lasagna was bait. "I just want to talk," he said. "You drove 40 minutes with a casserole to talk. Can I come in or not, Marcus?" That wasn't my name. I want to be clear about that. My name is Cole. I'm only telling you what he called me sometimes, when he forgot which son he was talking to, because by then he had 2 sons, and only liked thinking about one of them. I stepped back and let him in. Because therapy had taught me a lot of things, and one of the things it hadn't fully taken was the part of me that still wanted to know what fresh disaster my family had cooked up this time. Curiosity has gotten me into more trouble than anger ever has. He set the lasagna on my counter like it belonged there. He looked around my kitchen the way people look around a hospital room, searching for evidence of how bad things really are. He found a clean sink, a coffee maker that actually worked, and a corkboard with a half-finished crossword pinned to it. My life wasn't impressive, but it was steady, and steady seemed to bother him more than chaos would have. He sat at my table. I didn't. "What do you want?" I said. He folded his hands like you about to say grace. "It's about the baby. The baby Sawyer. My ex-wife's son, my brother Reese's son, not mine." No matter how many people in my family kept forgetting that detail on purpose. I'd seen one photo, sent through my ex-cousin because apparently nobody in that family could be bothered to text me directly anymore. A small, red, furious-looking infant wrapped in a hospital blanket the color of a robin's egg. I didn't hate him. I want that on the record too. I never hated Sawyer. I hated the architecture they were trying to build around him before he could even hold his own head up. "Reese is having a hard time," my father said. I almost laughed because of course that's where he started. Not "Sawyer is having a hard time, not your ex-wife is exhausted. Not "I'm sorry for what we let happen to you. Reese, it was always going to be Reese. Fatherhood didn't fix him," I said. Shocking. My father flinched, like I'd thrown something. "Don't be like this. If you wanted soft, you brought the wrong casserole." He took a breath. The kind people take when they're trying to remember a speech. He wasn't ready for this. "Was I ready when you asked me to raise his kid?" "That's different." "It's not. You just liked it better when I was the one carrying it." He looked down at his hands, at the wedding ring he'd worn through 2 marriages, because apparently consistency mattered to him in exactly one area of life. "Sawyer's colicky. He cries for hours. Reese shows up. He says he needs space. He missed 2 pediatrician appointments. He sends money sometimes, not regularly." I said nothing. "Your ex-wife called your stepmother last night, crying. Said she hasn't slept more than 2 hours straight in a month." "That sounds rough," I said. "It is rough. I believe you." My father looked up, hopeful, the way a dog looks up when it thinks the leash is coming off. Then I added, "I still don't see what that has to do with me standing in my own kitchen." His jaw tightened. "Because that baby needs somebody steady." There it was. Steady. The word my family had used on me since I was 12 years old. And started doing my own laundry, because nobody else was going to. Steady meant useful. Steady meant available. Steady meant Reese gets to set the house on fire. And Cole gets handed the bucket, because Cole doesn't complain about the smoke. My father leaned forward. "I know he's not yours by blood, but you might be the closest thing to a real father that boy ever gets." For a second I genuinely could not speak. Not from shock. From the absence of it. Somewhere under my ribs I'd known this was coming the moment I saw the jacket. My family hadn't learned anything in 3 years. They'd just repackaged the same request in a different blanket. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slow. The way you sit down before a fight you didn't pick but aren't going to lose either. "Let me get this straight," I said. "Reese makes the baby. My ex-wife carries the baby. Reese checks out. And somehow I'm still the fallback option." "I'm not saying it like that. You never say it like that. That's the whole trick. You make it sound like virtue. When what you're really asking is for me to disappear into somebody else's mistake. I'm asking you to think about an innocent child." "No. You're asking me to clean up after Reese. Again." He shook his head, stubborn the way. "Only a man who has never once had to clean up his own mess can be stubborn. That boy deserves love." "Agreed. He deserves a father. Also agreed. Then how can you sit there and act like this has nothing to do with you? I looked at him for a long time before I answered, because it doesn't. His face folded in on itself like I'd slapped him with the truth, instead of my hand. Maybe I had. I didn't raise you to be this cold, he said. No, I said. You raised me to be responsible for everyone except myself. That landed. For almost 10 full seconds the only sound in my apartment was the refrigerator humming, which felt like the most honest thing in the room. Then he reached for something inside his jacket and I stood up fast. What are you doing? He froze. I brought a few pictures. I don't want them. Cole? No. You don't get to sit at my table and hand me baby photos like they're Exhibit A. His mouth open closed. I held up a hand before he could try again. I'm not saying Sawyer is guilty of anything. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve every good thing in the world. But you don't get to use his face to rewrite what actually happened to me. His eyes went glassy, sharper than tears. One day that boy is going to know you could have helped him. I leaned forward. One day he's going to know his father walked out, and his grandfather spent years trying to put the blame on the one man Reese betrayed. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the person sitting across the table. Good. I was starting to recognize myself again. He left 12 minutes later, the lasagna still on my counter, untouched. Like a tax he'd hoped I'd pay without noticing the bill. At the door he turned back. Your brother is drowning, Cole. Then maybe stop throwing him everybody else's life vest. I said, and shut the door. I stood there a while after, hand still on the lock, and understood that my family wasn't finished. They were just reloading. After the divorce, I'd spent 2 years building something that resembled peace. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't buy a motorcycle, or start dating someone named Betrayal, who owned a yoga studio in Scottsdale. My life didn't come with a soundtrack. I went to work. I went to therapy on Thursday evenings in a strip mall office. Smelled like lavender and printer toner. And I learned how to make a roast chicken that didn't taste like punishment. I slept through most nights. Not all of them, but enough. I'd cut Reese off completely the day the DNA results came back. My stepmother Joanne had been blocked everywhere, after she told me I was being heartless for not stepping up. My father had come around exactly once before tonight, to admit he'd failed me, which for him counted as an Olympic event. We weren't close. He was the only one in that family who'd started saying the word wrong, without immediately following it with but. My ex-wife and I had no direct contact. That had been the healthiest decision of the entire divorce. Anything urgent came through her cousin Imogen, and there hadn't been much. The legal side was clean. My name wasn't on Sawyer's birth certificate. The test had made sure of that. Reese was Sawyer's father on paper. Emotionally, Reese was more like a weather pattern. Occasionally present, mostly unpredictable, and something everybody else had learned to prepare around. I learned that comparison from my uncle, Desmond, my father's younger brother, and the only person in my family, with the spine to say ugly things without dressing them up first. 2 days after the lasagna visit he called me. Your father came to see you, he said. Not a question. How'd you know? He called your aunt afterward crying. Said you were cold. Did he mention the lasagna? Desmond laughed once, short and dry. He did not lead with that. Didn't think so. He went quiet a second. Your stepmother's building a new story, you know? I sat down on my couch. What story? The one where Reese is overwhelmed, your ex-wife is suffering, the baby is innocent, and you're the one man too bitter to do the decent thing. I rubbed my eyes. Wonderful. I'm being cast as the villain in a sequel nobody asked my permission for. Desmond's voice dropped. Serious now. Listen to me. Your stepmother isn't going to let this go. Not because she thinks the boy is yours. She knows he isn't. She's doing it because if you step in, even a little, even as a favor, then what Reese did stops looking so ugly. I stared at the carpet. That was it exactly. If I got involved, even as a helper, even as the responsible uncle who showed up to soccer practice, my family could exhale. They could say, look, everyone came together. Look, Cole forgave us. Look. Maybe Reese did something terrible, but the family survived it. They didn't want me to be a father to that child. They wanted me to be a tourniquet. A few days after that my ex-wife asked to meet. Not through my father. Through Imogen, who texted that my ex-wife wasn't asking me for anything, only that my stepmother was telling people things, and I deserved to know what. I told Imogen I'd hear it out, no promises. Meeting my ex-wife felt dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with still loving her. Because I didn't, not in any way that mattered anymore. But old wounds have muscle memory. Sit across from someone who once knew your coffee order, and exactly where your weak spots were, and the past pulls up a chair whether you invited it or not. We met at a diner near the fairgrounds, the kind of place. With vinyl booths and a pie case that had been there longer than either of us had been alive. Public. Neutral. Too bright for anything to look like romance. She was already in the booth when I got there. She looked wrecked. Not performance wrecked, the kind people do for sympathy, but the real thing. Hair in a clip that had given up holding anything. No makeup. A stain on her cardigan that I recognized immediately as formula. She stood when she saw me. Hi. We sat. I wouldn't have blamed you for not coming, she said. That's a good start. She wrapped both hands around a mug of coffee she wasn't drinking. I heard Walter came to your place. He did. She closed her eyes. I'm sorry. I studied her. Did you send him? Her eyes opened fast. No. God, no. Cole, I swear. I believed her. I didn't trust her the way I used to. That kind of trust doesn't grow back like grass after rain. But in that booth I believed she was telling the truth. He brought lasagna, I said. She actually laughed, short and miserable. Subtle as ever. Her face fell again. I told her not to drag you into this. That surprised me. You did? She nodded. I told her you didn't owe me anything. I told her Sawyer wasn't your responsibility. She told me I was letting pride hurt my own son. I sat back, there it was again. My stepmother had a real gift for making other people's boundaries sound like a moral failing. She swallowed hard. Reese isn't showing up. I'd heard. He came to the hospital once. Took a picture, posted it with some caption about new beginnings, and left before the discharge nurse even came back. I said nothing. He promised he'd come to appointments. Missed the first one for a work thing. Missed the second because he said he was sick. The third he just didn't answer his phone. I looked into my coffee like it owed me something. Her voice cracked. I know I made this bed. You don't have to remind me. But I need you to know your stepmother's telling people you walked away from him. My jaw tightened. She said that? She pulled out her phone, slid it across the table. A message from Joanne to a cousin named Priya. Cole is still so angry he can't see what this child needs. Sawyer didn't ask to come into the world this way. Cole could be the only real father he ever has. But he's choosing bitterness. I read it twice. Bitterness. That was what my stepmother called it when I refused to be used as spare parts. Another message underneath. He was still married when the baby was conceived. In my heart that means he still has a responsibility. I almost laughed out loud in the diner. Unbelievable. She looked ashamed. I'm sorry. For which part? All of it. Another good answer. She pulled the phone back. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just thought you should know she's building a version where you're the reason that boy doesn't have a father. I nodded slowly. Where's Reese actually? She gave a tired laugh. Depends who's asking. To Joanne he's overwhelmed. To me he's busy. To the court he's unreachable. Has he paid anything? A little, once. Joanne paid more and told everyone it came from him. Of course she did. Reese's reputation, I thought, was apparently on family-funded life support. She looked at me a long moment. I told her to stop. I told her you were never his father. I looked away. It meant something. Not enough to undo anything, but enough to keep me from hating her in that booth. Thank you, I said. Her eyes filled. I'm trying to be better. For his sake I hope you are. She accepted that. When I left the diner I was angry, but it was a clean kind of angry, focused instead of loud. My stepmother was rewriting the record again, and this time she was using an infant as her pen. The family group text resurrected itself the following week. I'd left it after the divorce. Apparently my stepmother decided boundaries were a technical glitch and added me back, under a thread still labeled Briggs Family. I stared at the notification like it was a rash spreading across my screen. First message, from my aunt. Cole, we love you, but your stepmother is genuinely worried. This is bigger than being mad now. Then my cousin Theo. The baby didn't do anything wrong, man. Then someone named Priya, who only ever surfaced at holidays and GoFundMe links. Real men step up for children. I nearly threw the phone. Real men. That phrase again. Real men forgive. Real men provide. Real men raise the babies their brothers' fathers with somebody else's wife apparently. I stayed quiet. Then Reese joined the thread. Don't bother. Cole loves being the victim. He's using Sawyer to punish all of us. I sat very still. There's a moment where anger wants you to scream, and then there's a different moment where anger hands you a folder and says, be presussy. I had screenshots saved from months of texts my ex-wife had forwarded. Reese ducking calls, Reese telling Joanne he wasn't built for full-time fatherhood. Reese telling my ex-wife, Cole would probably be better at this than me anyway. He's always wanted to play saint. I posted that one first. The thread went dead silent. Then another. Reese to my ex-wife, stop pressuring me. You knew this was complicated. Then a third. Reese to Joanne, can't Cole just help out for a while? He's better with responsibility than me. Finally I typed, I didn't abandon Sawyer. Reese did. You're all mad because I won't replace him. Nobody answered for almost a full minute. Then Uncle Desmond, that about sums it up. My aunt, Joanne, is this true? My stepmother didn't answer. Reese did. You're pathetic for posting private stuff. I typed back, you were real private when you slept with my wife. Privacy isn't something you get to claim after you abandon your own kid. That ended the thread. At least for that day. But like every problem my stepmother touched, it didn't die. It got organized. 2 weeks later Desmond called again. Your stepmother's planning something, he said. I closed my laptop. What now? Sawyer's christening. I frowned. I didn't know they were doing one. Your ex-wife's family wanted it small. Joanne wants the whole crowd there. She's telling people it would mean so much if you came. No, listen. She's also telling people you were invited and probably won't show because you can't let anything go. I pinched the bridge of my nose. She's setting me up. Yes, if I don't go I'm the heartless one. If I go she'll try to manufacture some moment. Probably. I leaned back. What would you do? I'm not you, but if I went, I'd go ready. I knew exactly what that meant. Folder. Every healthy part of me said stay home, mute the phone, let them put on their little show without an audience of one. But silence, with my stepmother, was just open land. She'd build whatever she wanted on it if I didn't show up to claim the lot myself. So I went. Not to bond. Not to celebrate. I went because she'd spent 2 months turning my absence into evidence against me, and I was tired of letting her narrate me. The christening was at a small chapel outside Tulsa, brick and stained glass. The kind of building where people lower their voices. Even before anything sacred starts happening. I got there 10 minutes late on purpose. Desmond was waiting near the door. He glanced at the folder under my arm and nodded once. Good, he said. Nice to see you too. Inside I saw my ex-wife first, standing near the front pew with Sawyer in her arms, dressed in a tiny white outfit and socks that looked too small to be real. She looked nervous. When she spotted me her eyes widened, and she mouthed, I'm sorry. I nodded once. Reese stood near the aisle checking his phone. Like his own son's christening. Was a meeting he was trying to get out of early. My father looked stiff and exhausted. My stepmother moved through the room greeting relatives. The way some people host a fundraiser for their own suffering. When she saw me, her whole face lit up, which scared me more than anger would have. Cole, she said, walking toward me with her arms already opening. I stepped back no. Her smile flickered but recovered fast. I'm so glad you came. I'm sure. People were watching, of course they were. She lowered her voice. This means more than you know. I looked at Sawyer. Asleep on my ex-wife's shoulder. It doesn't mean what you want it to mean. Her eyes sharpened. Please don't do this today. I wasn't planning to. Were you? She looked away. There it was. The service was short. Sawyer, cried the second. The water touched his head, which honestly seemed like the only reasonable reaction in that entire room. Afterward everyone moved to the fellowship hall for coffee, store-bought cookies, and emotional ambushes. I stood near the back with Desmond. My ex-wife kept her distance, which I appreciated. Reese avoided my eyes entirely, which I expected. My stepmother waited 18 minutes before she made her move. She walked over holding Sawyer, and my ex-wife followed behind her. Panicked. Joanne, my ex-wife said softly. Please don't. My stepmother ignored her. She stopped in front of me, smiling through fresh tears, loud enough for the relatives nearby to hear. Cole, would you like to hold him? The room shifted, not physically, emotionally. My aunt turned her head. Theo paused mid-cookie. Reese looked up from his phone. My stepmother held Sawyer out, just slightly. Not enough to force him into my arms, but enough that refusing would look monstrous. It was a clean trap. If I took him, she'd cry, take a photo, and start calling it healing before lunch was over. If I refused, I'd be the man who rejected an innocent baby in a church hall in front of his whole family. I looked at Sawyer. He blinked up at the fluorescent lights with the confused seriousness of a tiny old man. Innocent. Completely innocent. That was exactly why I wasn't going to let her use him. I looked back at her. Her face crumpled. Cole. No, I said again calm. You don't get to use a baby as a prop for a photo. The room went silent. My stepmother's mouth opened. My ex-wife whispered, oh God. Reese muttered, here we go. I turned to him. Yes, Reese. Here we go. My stepmother clutched Sawyer closer. How can you be this heartless? There it was, the line she'd clearly been saving. She wanted witnesses. So I gave her some. I set my folder on the nearest table. Before anybody calls me heartless, let's talk about who actually walked out on this child. My father stepped forward. Cole, not here. You had months to handle this privately, I said. He stopped, which mattered. At least he knew when to stay stopped. Reese shoved his phone into his pocket. This is insane. No, I said. This is documented. My stepmother went pale. I pulled out the first page. This is Reese telling my ex-wife he wasn't ready to be tied down by a baby's schedule. Someone gasped. I pulled the second page. This is Reese telling Joanne I'd be better at the dad stuff than he is. My aunt looked at Reese. Did you say that? It was taken out of context, he snapped. Desmond laughed once, dry. I'd love to hear the noble version of that context. I pulled the third. This is Joanne telling my ex-wife not to pressure Reese because he shuts down under stress. My stepmother's voice cracked. I was trying to keep the peace. You keep calling it peace, I said. You mean silence. My ex-wife stood frozen, tears running freely now. I looked at her. Did I ever promise to be his father? She shook her head. No, did you ask me to? No. Did I ever say I hated him? No, she said, voice breaking. You said he was innocent. The room was dead still. I turned back to my stepmother. So why are you telling people I abandoned him? She clutched Sawyer tighter. I never used that word. I held up the screenshot from the group thread. My aunt read it over my shoulder, her face going hard. Yes, you did, Joanne. My stepmother started crying, big wounded, public tears. the kind she pulled out when facts became inconvenient. I am just trying to make sure this baby has love. No, I said. You're trying to make sure Reese has less shame to carry. Reese stepped toward me. Don't talk about me like I'm not standing right here. I looked at him. You act like you're not here every time your son actually needs you. That hit the room hard. His face twisted. You don't know what it's like. I almost smiled. You're right. I don't know what it's like to father a kid with my own brother's wife and then complain that parenting is stressful. He went red. Desmond stepped beside me, didn't touch me, just stood there. Reese saw him and stopped moving forward. Cole, please, my stepmother said. He needs someone steady. I looked at her and felt something settle in my chest. My whole life she'd used that word like a compliment. Steady, respectable, strong. But standing in that hall I finally heard what it actually meant. Available for sacrifice, no. I said. He needs adults who stop protecting unsteady men. She just stared at me. I kept going. I'm not Sawyer's father. I'm the man this family betrayed before he was even born, and I won't let you use his innocence to wipe away your guilt. My ex-wife sobbed into her hand. Reese looked away. My father closed his eyes. But he could love you, my stepmother whispered. That one landed harder than the rest. Not because it was manipulative, though it was, because it might have been true. Maybe Sawyer could have loved me. Maybe in some other version of this family. If Reese hadn't been Reese. If my ex-wife hadn't done what she did. If nobody had ever turned my pain into an inconvenience. I could have loved that boy without reservation. But a possibility isn't an obligation. Love built on top of a lie just becomes a different kind of cage. I looked at Sawyer, fussing now, probably, because every adult around him was radiating disaster. He deserves love, I said. He also deserves the truth. And the truth is his father's standing right there. I pointed at Reese. Reese looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. It didn't. Reese isn't ready, my stepmother said. Then stop asking me to be ready in his place. Nobody spoke. Then my ex-wife did, quiet but heard by everyone. Cole's right. My stepmother spun on her. Tess, she caught herself, said the wrong name out of habit and corrected fast. Ren, don't. My ex-wife. Ren held her arms out. Give me my son. That shifted the room more than anything I'd said. My stepmother hesitated. Ren stepped closer. Give him to me. Slowly, Joanne handed him over. Ren held Sawyer against her chest, kissed the top of his head, and looked around at everyone watching. I heard Cole. Reese heard Cole. Walter and Joanne protected Reese for 2 years. Cole didn't abandon Sawyer. He was never his father, and I won't let anyone keep using my son punt the one person in this entire mess who actually told the truth. I didn't see that coming. Nobody did. Reese laughed, bitter. Oh, now you're defending him? Ren turned to him. No, I'm done defending cowards. His face changed. That was the first time he understood Ren wasn't going to be his shield anymore either. My father finally spoke. Reese. Reese looked at him. You need to step up, my father said, low, or sign whatever needs signing so Ren can stop chasing you down. My stepson gasped. Walter. He looked at her. No, Joanne. Enough. 2 words. For my father, that was practically a revolution. Reese looked around the hall and realized, maybe for the first time in his life, nobody was rushing in to save him. So he did what Reese always did when consequences got close enough to touch him. He walked out of his own son's christening reception without another word. The silence behind him was heavy but not surprising. Ren bounced Sawyer gently, tears still on her face. My stepmother sat down like her knees had simply stopped working. I picked up my folder. Desmond touched my shoulder. You good? I looked at the door Reese had disappeared through. No, I said, but I'm done. And I meant it. After the christening, something shifted, not all at once, not because I gave a speech next to a tray of grocery store cookies. Families like mine don't heal that fast. But the light got in through a crack that hadn't been there before. My aunt called 2 days later and apologized. Theo texted that he'd believed the wrong version of things. Priya, the real men expert, never reached out again, which I considered a small mercy from whatever was watching over me. Ren sent one message through Imogen. I'm sorry my family tried to make him your burden again. I won't ask you to be his father. I should have said that out loud from the start. I read it 3 times. Then I replied through Imogen, thank you. I hope he grows up safe and loved. That was all. It was enough. My father called a week later to say Reese had finally agreed to a formal child support arrangement, after Warren threatened to take it to court. And Desmond had offered to personally drive him there, which I would have paid real money to witness. My father also mentioned my stepmother wasn't speaking to him. That must be peaceful, I said. He sighed. You have no idea. A month after that my stepmother sent me a real letter, because apparently she'd discovered that stamps could get past a blocked phone number. I almost threw it out unopened. Instead I opened it over the trash can like a man bracing for disappointment. 4 pages. She wrote that she loved me, that she'd made mistakes, that watching me refuse to hold Sawyer had broken her heart, that she still believed I had a gift for caring, and that he would benefit from having me in his life. There it was. Even in an apology, she was still recruiting. I slid the letter back in the envelope, wrote across the front, "This isn't an apology. This is another assignment," and mailed it right back to her. Maybe that was petty. I slept fine that night. Life kept moving in small, unglamorous ways. I stayed in therapy. I got promoted at work. Mostly because I could run a 6-figure HVAC retrofit while feeling emotionally hollowed out. Which apparently passes for composure under pressure. I bought a better couch. My fern lasted another 8 months before it finally gave up, and honestly, I respected its right to quit. Desmond and I kept fishing badly together every other Saturday. My father and I talked occasionally, not deeply but honestly, which was new for us. Reese became a father in the legal sense. Whether he became one in any meaningful sense, I couldn't tell you. From what I heard, Ren stopped begging him to care and started simply requiring it through paperwork. Healthier probably, for everyone involved. Sawyer turned 1. I didn't go to the birthday. Ren didn't ask me to. My stepmother apparently cried about it for 2 days straight. I didn't respond. People think boundaries are about anger. They're not. Anger is hot, it burns out, changes shape, eventually cools. Boundaries are colder than that. They're the fence you build after the fire's already gone out. So people can't keep walking through the ashes asking why you're still upset about something they've already decided to forget. Do I think about Sawyer? More than I'd admit out loud. I wonder what he'll be told when he's old enough to start asking questions. I hope Ren tells him the truth gently. Not the ugly parts. Not at first, but enough that he doesn't grow up inside the same fog I did. I hope Reese does better, though hoping Reese does better has been a family tradition with a pretty miserable track record. I hope my stepmother eventually learns the difference between love and control. I hope my father keeps finding the spine he found that one afternoon in a church hall. I hope I keep mine. But I know this much now. Being decent doesn't mean being available for every disaster somebody else creates. Being kind doesn't mean turning yourself into the solution for a problem you had no hand in making. And loving a child from a careful distance doesn't require letting the guilty adults around him use his innocence as a key back into your life. So was I wrong to refuse to be a father to my brother's son, even after my own father told me I was the only real one he'd ever have? Maybe some people will say yes. They'll say the boy is innocent. They'll say children need love wherever they can get it. They'll say blood doesn't make a family. They're right about all of it. But guilt doesn't make a father either. Manipulation doesn't make a family. And an innocent kid deserves a life built on the truth, not on a betrayed man being guilted into standing in the spot his own brother refused to fill. I didn't walk away from that child. His father did.